Welcome to today's episode of Big Blue Sports. Thanks for joining us against Sabres and Rangers at 7 p.m. tonight. We'll start, as we always do, with Fredonia Sports. Of course, the women's soccer team drawing a tie in the Battle by the Lake against Buff State last night at home against Buff State, a 1-1 tie. Olivia Kilmer scoring the only goal or Casey Mosier rather, scoring the only goal for Fredonia. Both of those goals coming in the second half. And a 1-1 tie brings the Blue Devils to 5-4-4 overall on the season, 2-1-1 in conference play. And again, the split so far for Fredonia is they have been a lot better at home than they have been on the road. They're 4-1-3 at home this season, 1-3-1 on the road. So they've been a much better team at home than they have been away from home. And they're going on the road this weekend, Saturday at 1 p.m. at Oneonta. And a special shout out as the freshman goalkeeper for the Blue Devils, Casey Fetzner, was named the SUNYAC Defensive Player of the Week. She has been excellent in goal for Fredonia this year. And again, it's outside of a couple of games. They're not a team that is necessarily an offensive powerhouse, but their defense has been excellent, and Casey Fetzner has been fantastic in goal as well. Men's soccer in a very similar spot, 5-4-3 overall on the season. And again, this is a team that is much better at home than they are on the road. Men's soccer is 4-0 in home games this season, just 1-4-2 in away games. They've played one neutral site game that ended in a tie. That was a 3-3 tie back at the end of August against New Jersey City University at Buff State. Speaking of Buff State, the Blue Devils were up there last night in the Battle by the Lake matchup, which, of course, the rivalry between Fredonia and Buff State being the two westernmost SUNYAC schools, and really two of the only ones on this particular part of the state, especially after Brockport and Geneseo both made the move to the Empire 8. It was a 1-1 game between Fredonia and Buff State as Liam Booth scored right off the bat in the second half to tie the game after Buff State got one at the midway point of the first half. But the Blue Devils end up losing on a penalty kick goal from Diego Rivera, who is the leading scorer not only for the Buff State Bengals, the leading scorer for all of SUNYAC this year. That was his 20th goal of the season. 20! And he knocks home a penalty kick goal to beat the Fredonia men's soccer 2-1. Volleyball also up against Buff State, and they come away with a sweep victory, a win in 3 straight sets at Buff State last night. The first set went into some heavy tiebreakers, with Fredonia taking it 32-30. The Blue Devils took the second set 25-23, and the third set 25-16. Volleyball, again, not the season necessarily that they've hoped for. It does snap a 2-game losing streak, but they have won 3 of their last 5 to bring their overall record to 6-12 on the season. Just 1-2 at home. Really have not played many games at home. There will be a handful more as their season extends into mid-November. 2-6 in road games and 3-4 in neutral site contests this year, again sitting at 6-12. Men's and women's cross country was at home on Saturday for the annual Cara Hall Memorial Invitational. The men's cross-country team finishing in 5th place. Stephen Hallberg, the top finisher for the Blue Devils, finishing in 7th place with a time of 26 minutes and 44 seconds. Rounding out the top 5, Edward Jordan, Kevin Moser, Lucas Peterson-Volts, and Caden Worthley, as Colin Cassidy and Sean Moser were the 6 and 7 displacers for Fredonia. Again, the Blue Devils finish in 5th place in the men's race. The women's race, again, competing at the Carl Hall Memorial Invite here on Fredonia campus. Women's team also finishing in 5th place. Amilcar Centeno with the top spot for Fredonia, 26 minutes and 28 seconds. Freshman Emily Frank not far behind her with Sierra Chenoy, the 3rd place finisher for Fredonia in 28th place. Callie Hudson, 4th for Fredonia, 32nd overall. And Juliana Rodriguez finishing 5th for the Blue Devils and in 40th spot overall. So one more meet left on the regular season schedule for men's and women's cross country. They are off this weekend before heading to Glassboro, New Jersey to take on Rowan University, a meet hosted by Rowan on Saturday, October 18th. That is the regular season finale for men's and women's cross country. SUNYACs on Saturday, November 1st. Those will be hosted by Plattsburgh this year. And then the regional championships, of course, remember the regional championships were here last year. Those will be hosted up in Rochester on Saturday, November 15th. So that is a look at your Fredonia sports. Going to take a short break. Got a lot to get to today. Of course, we're going to be talking a lot about the Buffalo Sabres. Going to talk about the Bills in the second part of the show, as well as, of course, the Bills beating they've played 2 games since the last time we were on the air. The Bills defeating the New Orleans Saints 31-19 a couple of weeks ago to improve to 4-0, suffering their first loss of the season this past Sunday night, a 23-20 home loss to the division rival Patriots in what was just overall an incredibly ugly game. So we're going to take a short break. When I come back, it's going to be all Sabres again. Regular season begins tonight. Sabres, Rangers at KeyBank Center in Buffalo at 7 p.m. on MSG. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports this afternoon on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Prepare to be enchanted by the sound of vocal performance. On Sunday, October 12th, that is this upcoming Sunday, the Fredonia School of Music will present its Schubert Project and hold a concert with the focused theme of German arts, otherwise known as Lied. The performance is faculty and student-led and will be held in Roush Recital Halls. Make sure to go for that. As I mentioned in the show's open, the Buffalo Sabres are back tonight. Yes, as I joked earlier this morning, I said the most poorly run franchise in all of professional sports is back tonight. That's, of course, only partially a joke. The Sabres trying to end the longest playoff drought in NHL history. The last time Buffalo was in the playoffs was all the way back in April of 2011 when the Sabres faced the Philadelphia Flyers in the first round and lost in 7 games. Last time the Sabres won a playoff series was actually against these New York Rangers. You have to go all the way back to 2007, the second round of the playoffs. The Sabres beat the Rangers in 6 games before falling to the Ottawa Senators in 5 in the Eastern Conference Final. And that, of course, watching their 2 co-captains, Danny Briere and Chris Drury, both leave in free agency. And it's pretty much been all downhill from there. And, of course, that series contained one of the most iconic moments of that era for the Sabres. Of course, Game 5 in Buffalo of that Sabres-Rangers series, with the series tied at 2 and Buffalo trailing 1-0 late in a phenomenal goaltending showdown between Henrik Lundqvist of the Rangers and Ryan Miller of the Sabres. Of course, Chris Drury, one of the co-captains, scored to tie the game with just 7 seconds left on the clock. And then Maxim Afinogenov scored the overtime winner after being benched by Lindy Ruff earlier in that series. Lindy Ruff is, of course, behind the bench for the Sabres, starting season number 2 of his second stint as Sabres head coach. And, you know, to be completely honest, I don't quite know how to feel about the Sabres. I will say, I think it's cynicism from being beaten down by watching terrible hockey for the last several years, but I don't know if this team really has what it takes to get back to the playoffs. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know that this team has that it factor. You know what I mean? So there are obviously some bright spots. I mean, obviously you have your star players, Rasmus Dahlin, Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, and there's some promise for what some players showed in the preseason. Josh Norris, who, of course, the Sabres acquired at the trade deadline last year in a trade with the Ottawa Senators when they traded Dylan Cousins to Ottawa. Norris only played a couple of games for the Sabres before getting injured and missing the rest of the season. Norris looked fantastic in the preseason for Buffalo. He looked great. And, of course, you have the jersey number swap, as last year Zach Benson, of course, has worn number 9 his entire career up until this season. Norris, who wore 9 in Ottawa, was wearing 13 for Buffalo when he first came over last year. They have switched numbers, so Norris now wearing number 9. Zach Benson will wear number 6. So we'll see how that works for both of those players moving forward. But I really like what I saw from Norris in the preseason. He looked absolutely fantastic, and the hope is that he can sort of continue that forward progression. There's also a number of young players for the Sabres who are primed to potentially have big years. You know, you've obviously, I think one of the main ones, it starts with Yuri Kulik, just 21 years old. He just turned 21 at the end of last season, and he showed some really, really good things at the end of his rookie season last year. And I think if Kulik can take that step forward, I think that he could be a very valuable player for this lineup. And I feel the same way about Zach Benson. It's absolutely insane to believe that Zach Benson is going into his 3rd season in the NHL, and he is 20 years old, which is absolutely insane. I am one of the biggest Zach Benson defenders of probably any Sabres fan. I think that he is going to be a really, really good forward. I see him as being sort of a two-way forward where, you know, yes, he can make plays on the offensive end. He's also a menace defensively. He is so good in the corner. He's excellent at winning puck battles, and I think that's something that the Sabres need. Speaking of forwards who are going to, hopefully, provide a very solid defensive presence for Buffalo, one of the 2 guys that the Sabres acquired in the J.J. Peterka trade this offseason when Peterka was sent to the Utah Mammoth, of course, the former Arizona Coyotes franchise, Josh Doan, the son of longtime Arizona Coyotes forward Shane Doan, and I've already called him Shane by accident like 4 times. Josh Doan, just 23 years old. He'll turn 24 in February. And I think he's a guy who has a chance to be a really solid contributor for Buffalo. I like his defensive game, and that's the draw with him, is that he is not necessarily a high scorer. Last year with Utah, in 51 games, he had 7 goals and 12 assists for 19 points. I think he's going to be a really, really solid depth forward for the Buffalo Sabres this season. I'm excited to watch him. The other part of that trade, of course, I would say the more high-end player being defenseman Michael Kesselring, who I'm really excited to watch. Kesselring, unfortunately, went down with an injury in the preseason. He will start the year on injured reserve, and that, I think, is maybe the biggest concern for the Sabres going into this season, is the number of players that are starting the year on injured reserve. So as of right now, as of this moment, the Sabres have 4 players listed on their injured reserve. One of them is Kesselring, as I'd already mentioned. Jordan Greenway going down, which that's sort of becoming a really concerning trend for Buffalo, is that Jordan Greenway is continuing to deal with injury issues that have sort of plagued his career so far. Buffalo's starting goaltender also starting the year on injured reserve, as Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen went down with an injury in the preseason. I don't think he's supposed to be out too long-term, but he is going to miss at least the start of the season. And one other player on injured reserve, Owen Power, although I did see Lindy Ruff said that Owen Power is expected to play tonight, so presumably he will be activated off of injured reserve and will be good to go for the Sabres tonight. So we'll see how that pans out. One of the biggest weaknesses for Buffalo over the last handful of years has been their defensive core. They have obviously a lot of top talent. I mean, they have Rasmus Dahlin, who I think is a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. If anyone doesn't think he's a top 10 defenseman, they're crazy and I don't know what they're watching. You've got Owen Power, who's another former number 1 overall pick. And Power, there's been some good, some bad, right? I think Power had a very solid season last year. The knack on him is his defensive game, his physical game, especially in front of the Sabres net. Power tends to get pushed around a lot in front of the net, and a lot of fans really want him to be much more physical than he is. Then there's the issue of Bo Byram. So it looked for a time in the offseason that the Sabres were going to trade Bo Byram. Of course, Byram, a former 4th overall pick by the Colorado Avalanche, won the Stanley Cup with them back at the beginning of his career in 2022. Byram traded to Buffalo in exchange for Casey Middlestat a couple of years ago. And Bo last season, I mean, his numbers and his metrics, they were not good. They were really bad. And I think Byram is one player who the Sabres absolutely need to step up and have a bounce-back season. I mean, you looked at the numbers. He was okay when on a pair with Rasmus Dahlin. When he was on a pair with anybody else, it was a disaster. And the Sabres need Byram to be a lot better than that. If their players can play up to their full potential, Buffalo has a top 4 defensive core that could be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, you've got Dahlin, Power, Byram, and Kesselring. If all 4 of those players can A, stay healthy, and B, play up to their potential, you might have a really solid top 4 group there. And the rest of it, defensively, Ryan Johnson looking to hopefully have that season where he fully breaks onto the NHL scene. He's been kind of going back and forth between Buffalo and Rochester so far in his career. Johnson, the 31st overall pick back in 2019. He's a player that I really like, but there definitely are still some weaknesses to his game. He's still a young defenseman for sure. Jacob Bryson brought back by the Sabres this year as well. The expectation is that he will probably fill the 7th defenseman role. And then the other defenseman of note is another new guy, Connor Timmins, acquired in a trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins this offseason as the Sabres traded Connor Clifton to Pittsburgh to bring in Timmins. And Timmins supposedly is going to be another really solid right-hand shot defenseman. So presumably, if players stay healthy, you're going to be looking at a defensive core of probably Byram and Dahlin on the top pair, Power and Kesselring on the second group, and then potentially Johnson and Timmins on the third pair with Matthias Samuelsson and Jacob Bryson as the 7th and 8th defensemen. Samuelsson, of course, has had a lot of injury concerns. Remember, he's only 25. He's had some really, really rough seasons the last few years. On paper, the Sabres' defense looks very solid. They've got very talented players, I think. The problem is Buffalo's defense, outside of Dahlin and sometimes Owen Power, have not played anywhere close to their potential. And that's going to be the big thing for Buffalo is they need their defense to step up, especially because goaltending may be a little bit of a question mark this year. I'd already mentioned that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen starting the year on injured reserve. The Sabres also placed Free agent signing Alexander Georgiev on waivers on Tuesday after he was terrible in the preseason. So Buffalo's goaltending tandem looks like it's going to be Alex Lyon, who was signed in free agency this year. Of course, Lyon won the Stanley Cup as the backup for the Florida Panthers 2 years ago and has been a relatively solid goaltender the last couple of years. And also Buffalo claiming Colton Ellis off of waivers from the St. Louis Blues. We'll see how Ellis plays. I would imagine Alex Lyon probably gets the start tonight. So we'll see how things go. And I'd also like to point out that Alex Lyon is the oldest player on the Buffalo Sabres. He's the oldest player on the team. And I will say I wholeheartedly apologize to anyone who is of an older age. I'm not trying to make you feel old when I say this, but Alex Lyon is the oldest Buffalo Sabre. He is 32 years old. Alex Lyon was born in December of 1992, and he is the oldest player on the team. So again, that sort of factors into it too, because Buffalo they are a very young team. Actually, I lied. He is not the oldest player. Jason Zucker is the oldest player. He's age 33. Zucker was born in January of 92. So still, the two oldest players on the Sabres were both born in 1992, which for anybody who's counting at home was the third season in a row that the Bills made it to the Super Bowl. But we'll see, one of my biggest drawbacks for the Sabres is I feel like they are sort of banking on too much. One thing that Jason Zucker said in his press conference at the end of the year last year, and I'll obviously paraphrase what he said, but he basically said that he was told by a coach once that hope is not a good strategy. And he's absolutely right, because I think the Sabres are putting a little bit too much stock in, well, okay, if this young player has a breakout season, and if this young player plays up to his potential, and if this happens and that happens and this and that, then maybe we can make the playoffs. You're banking on too much. And after J.J. Peterka was traded to Utah, which, again, Peterka ended up signing a massive deal with the Mammoth that I am okay with the Sabres not giving him. After he signed that deal, I was sort of waiting and hoping that there would be some sort of corresponding move where the Sabres would go out and try to land a scorer to replace Peterka's offensive output. And that really never happened. So my concern is, where is the offense coming from? I could see the Sabres being a much more well-rounded and complete team than they were last year. I could see the Sabres honestly being a better team than they were last year. But my number one concern is, where are those goals? Where is that offense coming from? And with question marks in goal, it's going to make it all the more important for the offense to really step up. You're going to need a lot of your young players to step up and contribute offensively. And that hasn't really happened over the last couple of seasons. So the hope is that your young players can really come into their own. And the hope is also that some of your top scorers who have displayed a knack for offense in the past can bounce back to form. The number one guy on that list for me is Jack Quinn. Of course, Jack Quinn is only 24 years old. Jack Quinn actually shares a birthday with my sister, which is kind of interesting. Quinn's numbers last year, not bad, but not what you'd hope that they would be. Quinn played 74 games for the Sabres, 15 goals, 24 assists, 39 points. I sort of think that he might have been, I think Quinn might have been still hampered a little bit by injury. Of course, his 23-24 season, Jack Quinn played in just 27 games, missed a lot of time with injury. In those 27 games, Jack Quinn put up 19 points, 9 goals, and 10 assists. He was really good for Buffalo in that stretch, but then, of course, went down with some injuries. And I think that Quinn really needs to rediscover his offense. And I think some of that is going to come from line mates, too. You know, I'm not sure exactly what the lines are going to look like, but if you maybe have, you know, your top line, obviously you're going to have Tage Thompson probably as your top line center. You'll have Thompson, Tuck as the center and right wing. Possibly it'll be either Zucker or Benson as your top left wing. And then your second line, we'll say Benson just for now. So we'll say, you know, maybe Benson, Thompson, Tuck on the top line. If they have a line of Zucker, Norris, and Quinn, maybe there could be something there. You go into the bottom six, one player I didn't mention yet who's a player I really like for the Sabres is Ryan McLeod, their third-line center. I thought McLeod was excellent in his role for the Buffalo Sabres last year, and I'm excited to see what he can do. The biggest thing is these players have to be fully invested. You can't afford to have guys slacking off. You have to be fully locked in at every point of the season. The rest of Buffalo's bottom six, I mean, I imagine their third line, they might try to put McLeod and Doan together. I don't know who would be on the left side of that line, but you think about then probably, if you think about it, Yuri Kulik's got to fit in there somewhere too. So do they throw Kulik in the center spot and put Thompson on the wing? You know, where does Peyton Krebs factor into all this? I like the way Krebs played as a fourth-line center last year. So I will say I think there is genuine promise for the Sabres this year, but I don't blame fans who are sort of struggling to have that belief and really have that hope because of how much of a letdown the Sabres have been in the last couple of years. Buffalo will have the benefit of getting some early games on home ice. The Sabres play 4 of their first 5 games at home. Of course, tonight at home against the Rangers at 7 o'clock. They are on the road Saturday at Boston at 7 o'clock. And then it's 3 straight home games next week with, of course, next Monday being Indigenous Peoples Day. The Sabres at home against the Colorado Avalanche at 12:30 on Monday. Wednesday night, a 7 p.m. home matchup against Ottawa. And the Sabres host the twice-defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers next Saturday the 18th at 1 p.m. before heading to Montreal. The Sabres only have 4 road games, I should say, in the month of October, which is kind of crazy, honestly. But there's an opportunity for Buffalo to really pick up some points on home ice, and I'm excited to see what they can do. As far as will the Sabres make the playoffs this year, I go back and forth on it because I'm excited about the young players and what they can provide for the team, but at the same time, I have a lot of question marks about where the offense is going to come from. I have a lot of question marks about goaltending, and I worry that the defense will not play up to their potential. So I'm going into the season with an open mind, going in optimistic, but at the same time understanding that we may be back here in April saying that we've now missed the playoffs for a 15th straight season. I hope not, but we'll see how things go this season. And again, the regular season begins tonight at 7 p.m. as the Sabres host the New York Rangers. Going to take a short break. Thanks for tuning in this afternoon. When I come back, going to be spending the rest of the show talking about the Bills, their last couple of games, and finishing off, as always, making my picks for Week 6 of the NFL season. Thanks for tuning in this afternoon to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. Again, the Bills off to a 4-1 start, but could have been 5-0 if not for an incredibly sloppy game against the New England Patriots on Sunday night. Of course, the Bills were at home in their new rivalry uniforms, debuting the iced out white jerseys with the gray and white helmets. And it was a cool look. I mean, I'll be totally honest. It was a cool look. I was not a fan of the uniforms at first, but I really sort of warmed up to them. And now I'm almost thinking maybe the Bills should ditch them forever based on how Sunday night went. But the Bills at home against the Patriots. Bills came in at 4-0. Patriots came in at 2-2. And it was a really just incredibly sloppy game, really from the get-go. Buffalo's defense forced a 3-and-out on the opening drive, but the Bills got the ball, and Josh Allen into New England territory after a 20-yard pass. Allen fumbles, and the Patriots recover. New England getting the ball right back, and immediately on the first play, Ramondre Stevenson catches a pass, but Shaq Thompson forces the fumble. Terrell Bernard recovers. So the Bills defense makes a big play, and the offense proceeds to do absolutely nothing. The Bills on an upcoming drive, not that one, they would punt on that drive. Bills would have the ball, and deep in their own territory, a short pass from Allen to Keon Coleman complete, and then Keon fumbles. New England recovers, and the Patriots set up in prime territory. Fortunately, again, the Bills defense does their job. They hold the Patriots offense to 3. New England leads 3-0 at the end of the first quarter. Bills' first drive of the second quarter, which starts late first quarter. Buffalo driving down the field. They put an 11-play, 54-yard drive together, capped off by a 31-yard Matt Prater field goal. Bills tie the game at 3. Again, the two teams go back and forth with some drives that stalled. New England ends the half with an 11-play, 69-yard drive, capped off by a 19-yard Andy Borregales field goal. New England leads 6-3 at the half. Just an abysmal performance from the Bills offense in the first half, filled with penalties. Obviously, you had the 2 turnovers, just some really awful penalties that are not characteristic of the Bills whatsoever. But Buffalo receives the second half kickoff, and it looks like the offense is back. 10 plays, 71 yards, capped off by a Josh Allen 6-yard touchdown pass to Curtis Samuel. Hey, Curtis Samuel is actually still on the Bills roster, believe it or not. You would never guess that based on his stats at the end of most games. But the Bills take the lead. They're up 10-6. And that's when the New England offense gets it rolling as well. 5 plays, 74 yards, as Drake May ends up connecting with Stephon Diggs for a 32-yard pass to set New England up in a first-and-goal situation. Ramondre Stevenson runs it in for a touchdown. New England up 13-10. Bills get the ball back and put together a decent drive, but the Bills get all the way to the Patriots' 9-yard line. And then the Bills called for offensive pass interference. They move backwards, and Allen makes a horrific decision and throws a terrible interception. So again, the Bills offense, very, very out of sync. We go to the fourth quarter with New England leading 13-10. Patriots have the ball. 90-yard drive, 11 plays, and Ramondre Stevenson runs it in from 7 yards out. This is where the Bills defense sort of starting to get gashed a little bit as the Patriots take a 20-10 lead. But the Bills do respond. They drive down the field, and Josh Allen ends up hitting Keon Coleman for a 2-yard touchdown to bring Buffalo back within 3 at 20-17. Bills defense then comes up big and forces a 3-and-out. Buffalo puts together a drive, and with just over 2 minutes to go, Matt Prater knocks it through from 45 yards out to tie the game at 20. But Drake May and the Patriots, give them credit, the offense did a great job in this game. May puts together a 7-play, 37-yard drive that eats up most of the remaining clock and makes some unbelievable throws in the process. But Andy Borregales, with just 15 seconds left, connects from 52 yards away, and the Patriots come away with a 23-20 win. Overall, the biggest downfalls for Buffalo, obviously, their 3 turnovers, very uncharacteristic. The Bills only turned the ball over 1 time in the first 4 games of the regular season combined, and they had 3 on Sunday night. But I would say the penalties were the worst part of it for Buffalo. The Bills were penalized 11 times for 90 yards. The Patriots also had 8 penalties for 93. But for Buffalo, a team that through the first 4 games of the year was one of the least penalized teams in all of football, the Bills, just an incredibly sloppy and messy performance. You know, you had Sean McDermott said that the Bills were trying to be too cute on offense, which was absolutely true. I mean, some of the play calls by Joe Brady I thought were incredibly stupid. I'll just be totally honest. And Josh Allen described it as bad football, and he's right. The Bills played their worst game that they've played in quite a while. And I guess there's a couple of ways to look at that. Because on the one hand, you say, gosh, this was such a winnable game. It was such an important game, and the Bills totally blew it and played incredibly sloppy. The other way you can look at it is this. Okay, the Bills played a horrendous game, played terrible football, and still only lost by 3 when New England kicked the game-winning field goal with 15 seconds left. Not to mention, the Bills are still 4-1 and are still ahead in the AFC East, even though right now they don't have the tiebreaker over New England. The Bills do get another shot at the Patriots as they go to Foxborough later in the season, but they've got a chance to redeem themselves next week, and again, they're back on primetime. The Bills traveling down to Atlanta for a Monday night matchup with the Falcons next Monday. Kickoff at 7:15 on ESPN. The Bills 4-1, the Falcons 2-2. Of course, this will only be the Bills' second road game of the season, as Buffalo started the year with 4 out of their first 5 games being played at Highmark Stadium. According to ESPN Analytics, the Bills have a 61% chance of winning this game. Buffalo also, as of right now, is a 4.5-point favorite to beat the Falcons next Monday night. And I will say, the game on Monday night is going to say a lot about the Bills as a team. Because the question is, okay, this horrendous performance on Sunday night last week, is it a warning sign? Should we be pressing the panic button? Or was it just, chalk it up to one bad night? It was a fluke. We had a rough game, but we're fine. And I think if the Bills really come out and take control and beat the Saints in convincing fashion, then I think you can look at it as, all right, they just had one really bad game. If things get a little bit hairy against the Falcons, I think you can start raising some questions. And there are some specific questions that a lot of Bills fans have that I think are really valid too. Like, for example, Buffalo's receivers on the outside have really, really struggled to get separation. I will say, in the Sunday night game, I thought Dalton Kincaid played maybe his best game as a pro. He was fantastic in the pass game, and that's exactly what Buffalo needs to see from him. The problem was the Bills weren't able to get really anything going on the outside. Where was Josh Palmer? Where was Keon Coleman outside? He had a rough night outside of his touchdown catch. Curtis Samuel had a touchdown catch, but still doesn't really do much else for the Bills. And so there are these nagging questions. Khalil Shakir didn't have a particularly good night either. And that's the thing. Shakir and Kincaid are so valuable because they can really just eat up the middle of the field, and that's an excellent skill to have. But you also need to have players who can make plays out on the boundary. We've seen that from Keon Coleman. We definitely saw that from Keon Coleman the first 4 games of the season. Didn't see it Sunday night. I chalked that up to he just had a rough night. Josh Palmer has been maybe a little bit of a disappointment so far, and Curtis Samuel has been a massive disappointment now in his second season with the Bills. He really hasn't done anything to contribute to Buffalo's offense. But I think the question for Buffalo is, what is your offense truly made of? Because we saw some really bad football offensively. And even though the Bills' defense was not necessarily great on Sunday night, they've really struggled this year. I honestly put a lot more blame on the offense than I do on the defense. I mean, you figure the defense gave up 23 points. That's a reasonable number. That's not bad. The offense, for the talent this offensive group has, there's no way you should only be putting up 20 points against a team that has struggled the last couple of years. And granted, I think the Patriots are building something solid this year, but I did not like Joe Brady's play calling at all. And I thought Josh Allen made some really bad decisions. He also made some great plays, but I think you saw the offense being a little bit reckless, being beyond careless. I mean, 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles and an interception is absolutely inexcusable. You can't turn the ball over 3 times and commit 11 penalties, which I might add, a good amount of those penalties were committed by the offense. You can't have that much of a stinker of a performance and expect to win games, no matter who you're playing. And the Bills have sort of gotten away with it with the last couple of weeks in their wins over the Dolphins and the Saints. They didn't play their best, but they sort of got away with it. And I think the Bills really need to show on Monday night. They need to come out and make a statement and show that Sunday night was a fluke. It was a one-time bad game. This team is better than that. They've got to show that. I think a lot of the fans' question marks about offensive playmakers are legit. I mean, the Bills' receivers outside of Shakir and through the first couple of games of this season, Coleman, they haven't really shown the Bills much of anything. And Josh Allen needs to be able to rely on his pass catchers to make big plays. And so far, again, outside of Shakir and Coleman through the first couple games of the season, they haven't really shown that. So I think that it is imperative that the Bills receivers put together a good game, and we'll see how things go on Monday night. So for the last few minutes of the show today, I'm going to go through and make my picks for this upcoming week of NFL action. The first game gets started tonight, an NFC East matchup as the New York Giants host the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, the Eagles, like the Bills, went into last weekend undefeated and suffered their first loss of the year, losing at home. I think the Eagles get back on track and come away with a win in this game. Another game overseas as the Broncos face the Jets. The Jets 0-5, looking for their first win, and I think they're going to have to keep looking. I think Denver honestly looks very solid. I've said before, I think the Broncos are going to be a playoff team this year, and I think they beat the Jets. Into the 1 o'clock window of games, the Arizona Cardinals against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts off to a 4-1 start to the season. So impressive. Arizona 2-3 after an embarrassing loss last week to the Tennessee Titans. Honestly, I think the Cardinals get back on track and go into Indianapolis and get the win. I think the Colts have had a good start to the year. I think you're going to see them come back down to earth a little bit. Chargers and Dolphins in Miami. The Chargers, of course, have had a couple of rough games the last 2 weeks. After a 3-0 start, they've lost back-to-back, and I think they definitely get back on track and beat the Dolphins in Miami. Browns and Steelers in Pittsburgh. And this one, so the Browns 1-4, and the Steelers 3-1. I'm going with a crazy upset. I'm picking Cleveland to go into Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers. The Dallas Cowboys against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina at 2-3. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm also going to pick the upset in this game, and I'm going to pick Carolina to beat Dallas. I will say I picked the Cowboys to lose to the Jets last week, and they dominated the Jets. So maybe that wasn't the smartest pick, but anyways, we're going to go with Carolina in that game because I like to see chaos unfold. The Seattle Seahawks and the Jacksonville Jaguars. This I actually think is going to be a really good game. I think the Seahawks go into Jacksonville, get the win, but I think this is going to be an excellent game. Jacksonville's 4-1, and they're looking solid so far this year. Rams and Ravens in Baltimore. This Ravens team is absolutely nothing without Lamar Jackson. The Rams go in there and get the win. The Ravens drop to 1-5. Last 1 o'clock game, the Patriots in New Orleans against the Saints. I thought New England looked really good in their win over Buffalo, and I think they keep it going. They go into New Orleans and get the win. 4:05, only 3 late window games this week. 4:05, the Titans at the Raiders, a matchup of 2 1-4 teams. And I think the Titans continue building off of what they accomplished last week in their insane win in Arizona. And I think they go into Vegas and get the win over the Raiders. 2 4:25 kickoffs this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the San Francisco 49ers, both teams at 4-1. I think this matchup has the potential to, again, be a very close game. I like Tampa to win this game and go to 5-1. The last 4:25 game of the week, the Bengals at the Packers at Lambeau Field. The Bengals, of course, making a trade and picking up Joe Flacco. He will start. I think Green Bay gets the win in this game, though. The Bengals drop to 2-4. Sunday Night Football, this one's going to be fun. The Lions in Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. The Lions 4-1, Chiefs 2-3, and I think the Lions go in there and get the job done and come away with the win. Monday night doubleheader, of course, the first game 7:15. The Bills heading to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. I definitely think Buffalo gets the win in this game. They've got a rebound from their performance last week, and they get the win. And the second half of the doubleheader, the Washington Commanders hosting the Chicago Bears with Jaden Daniels back. The Bears looking to get redemption for what happened to them, of course, last year in the Hail Mary game, the embarrassing Tyreek Stevenson Hail Mary game. And honestly, this one I think could be fairly close. I'm going to pick Washington to win it because I think that they are the better team. But again, Monday Night Football, you honestly never really know what's going to happen. Well, that is all for today's episode of Big Blue Sports. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Again, the regular season for the Buffalo Sabres gets started tonight at 7 p.m. when the Sabres play host to the New York Rangers. We'll be back here not next Thursday. I will actually be down in Washington, D.C. for a journalism conference, so I will be back here in 2 weeks to talk about the Sabres season, talk about how the Bills are doing, and as always, Fredonia Sports and anything else, of course. So, thank you for tuning in this afternoon to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Local at 1 is next with all of your favorite local music hits, and we will catch you in 2 weeks. Go Sabres.